A homeless boy offered to fix the luxury car of a millionaire who laughed at him. But when the boy did the unthinkable, secrets came to light and their lives changed forever. A story of overcoming and love that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where you are watching from. The heat of February in New York was relentless. The asphalt of Fifth Avenue radiated waves of steam that distorted the view of the mirrored skyscrapers, creating urban mirages that seemed to dance between the corporate buildings. It was noon when Gabriel Anderson emerged from the building of Anderson Construction, his company that had dominated the high-end real estate sector in the city for 20 years. At 45, Gabriel maintained the upright and confident posture that characterized him since college, when he still dreamed of building skyscrapers that touched the clouds. His impeccably tailored navy blue Armani suit contrasted with the sweat that began to form small beads on his forehead. The grey hairs at his temples, which his ex-wife used to say gave him the charm of a mature man, now only reminded him of the years he had lost building a business empire while his family silently crumbled. The divorce, finalized just 3 months ago, was still an open wound in his pride. 20 years of marriage reduced to signatures on legal papers and the cold division of assets. Walking towards his silver Ferrari 488, parked in the reserved spot in front of the building, Gabriel adjusted his Ray-Ban sunglasses and checked his Omega Seamaster, a 15th wedding anniversary gift. Ironically, the watch that was supposed to celebrate the longevity of their union now only marked the minutes of his daily solitude. It was then that he saw him. A boy of about 15 was crouched next to his car, with his head practically inside the open engine compartment. The boy wore a faded white t-shirt with small holes in the seams and a pair of oversized denim shorts that were clearly too big at the waist and too short at the legs. His bare feet contrasted with the hot concrete of the sidewalk, and his messy, long brown hair fell over his eyes as he carefully examined the engine of the $200,000 vehicle. "Hey, get out of there, kid!" Gabriel shouted, quickening his pace and feeling the adrenaline rise. "What do you think you're doing?" The boy slowly raised his head, revealing incredibly expressive brown eyes, a mix of sharp intelligence and premature weariness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. His features were delicate, but there was a hardness in his expression that spoke of familiar streets, nights spent outdoors, and a childhood stolen too early. "Relax, man," the boy said with a clear accent from the outskirts of New York, but undeterred by Gabriel's imposing figure. "I'm not messing with anything, just checking. Your car has a problem with the fuel pump." Gabriel stopped abruptly, frowning. "What do you mean, a problem with the fuel pump? This car came out of the dealership 2 weeks ago." "Yeah, but the noise it's making isn't normal," the boy replied, standing up and wiping his dirty hands on his shorts. He was shorter than Gabriel had imagined, probably not more than 5'3". "Just listen." Without asking for permission, the boy reached for the keys in Gabriel's hand. "Can I start it?" "Are you crazy? I'm not letting you touch my car." Gabriel stepped back, instinctively protecting the keys. "Get out of here before I call security." The boy shrugged, an ironic smile playing on his lips. "All right, man, but when your car breaks down in the middle of FDR Drive this afternoon, don't say I didn't warn you." There was something in the boy's absolute confidence that made Gabriel hesitate. Throughout his career, he had learned to trust his instincts, especially when it came to assessing people. And something in those brown eyes intrigued him deeply. "Okay," Gabriel finally said, but maintaining an authoritative tone. "You have 30 seconds to explain exactly what you think you know about cars." The boy smiled for the first time, revealing white, straight teeth, a surprise considering his apparent street situation. "My grandpa was a mechanic. He worked at Volkswagen for 40 years, back when they still made Beetles in this country. Before he died 3 years ago, he taught me everything about engines. He used to say I had angel ears. I could figure out any problem just by the sound." "Your grandpa," Gabriel repeated, feeling a strange familiarity in the way the boy spoke about family, something that contrasted with his apparent state of abandonment. "Yeah, my grandpa, Mr. Johnson. He always said that a car engine is like a human heart. When there's a problem, the rhythm changes." The boy tilted his head as if he were listening to something Gabriel couldn't perceive. "Your Ferrari has its heart racing. The pump is forcing more than it should to compensate for something." Gabriel watched the boy with growing curiosity. There was no arrogance in his speech, just technical knowledge expressed with the simplicity of someone who truly understood the subject. "What's your name?" Gabriel asked, his posture softening slightly. "Lucas," the boy replied without hesitation. "Lucas Smith." "And you?" "Gabriel Anderson." He pointed to the building. "Behind him. Owner of the construction company." Lucas nodded as if he already knew. "Yeah, I figured, because of the car and the way you dress." Then his expression grew more serious. "Can I ask you a question, Mr. Gabriel?" "Sure." "Why do you look like you lost the last bus of the night?" The question hit Gabriel like a punch in the stomach. The boy's brutal honesty was disconcerting, especially because it was true. For 3 months, Gabriel was trying hard to maintain the facade of success and control, but a street kid had identified his vulnerability in a matter of minutes. "That's none of your business," Gabriel replied, but without aggression. "It really isn't," Lucas agreed. "But sometimes it helps to talk to someone who won't judge you because they have nothing to lose. On the streets, we learn to listen. It's a matter of survival." Gabriel fell silent for a moment, observing the constant flow of Fifth Avenue. Executives hurried past, each absorbed in their own problems, oblivious to the impromptu conversation happening next to the luxury car. "All right," he finally said, "show me this problem with the fuel pump, but if you scratch anything—" "I won't scratch anything, Mr. Gabriel. A street kid's word." Lucas smiled again and extended his dirty hand towards the keys. Gabriel hesitated for another moment, then handed over the keys. Something about that boy intrigued him deeply. A combination of vulnerability and wisdom that didn't make sense in someone so young. Perhaps it was loneliness speaking louder, or maybe it was genuine curiosity, but he wanted to find out if the boy really knew what he was talking about. Lucas inserted the key into the ignition with reverential care, as if he were touching an expensive musical instrument. When the engine roared to life, he closed his eyes and remained completely still for almost a minute, just listening. "Done," he said, turning off the car and returning the keys. "I was right. It's the pump. It's working at 240 kilopascals, when it should be at 220. It's not dangerous yet, but in 2 weeks it will cause serious problems." Gabriel was taken aback. The boy had used precise technical terminology, something even some mechanics specializing in luxury cars didn't fully grasp. "How do you know about kilopascals?" Gabriel asked. "My grandpa had some technical books at home. I read them when I had nothing to do." Lucas shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I like to understand how things work." The sound of a siren in the distance interrupted the moment, reminding Gabriel of where he was and the strangeness of the situation. Here he was, a millionaire businessman, talking about automotive mechanics with a street kid in the middle of Fifth Avenue. "Lucas," Gabriel said slowly, "where do you live?" The boy hesitated for the first time since they started talking. "Around here, wherever I can." "And your family?" "I only had my grandpa. After he died—" Lucas didn't finish the sentence, but his expression said it all. Gabriel felt something stir inside his chest, a compassion he hadn't felt for anyone other than himself in months. Perhaps it was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name, but he knew this encounter wasn't a coincidence. "Lucas," he finally said, "do you want to grab lunch?" Per se, on the top floor of one of the most exclusive buildings on Fifth Avenue was an environment Lucas had never imagined existed. The 4-meter-high ceiling, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of New York City, and the minimalist decor in shades of white and gold created an almost extraterrestrial atmosphere for the boy used to the grey streets of the outskirts. Gabriel discreetly observed Lucas's reaction as the maître, an elegantly dressed man in an impeccable black suit, led them to a reserved table near the windows. The boy walked carefully, as if fearing to break something just by looking at it. But his eyes absorbed every detail of the environment with a voracious curiosity that reminded Gabriel of himself as a child, visiting for the first time the architecture firm where his father worked as an intern. "Mr. Anderson," the maître said with a professional smile. "The usual?" Gabriel nodded, then looked at Lucas, who seemed mesmerized by the view of the city below. "And for the young gentleman, a Coke and the dish of the day." Lucas turned quickly. "You don't have to order anything expensive, Mr. Gabriel. A sandwich is fine." "Relax, kid. It's just lunch." Gabriel settled into his chair, but there was a tension in his shoulders he couldn't completely disguise. The truth was, he also felt out of place. Not in the restaurant, which he had frequented for years, but in the situation. When was the last time he had lunch with someone without a business agenda behind it? As they waited for their order, Gabriel studied the boy more closely. Now, under the natural light pouring in through the windows, he could see details that had gone unnoticed on the street. Lucas's hands were surprisingly well kept for someone living on the streets. Clean nails, no excessive calluses. There was a small scar on his chin, almost imperceptible, and his brown eyes had a glimmer of intelligence that contrasted with the apparent innocence of his 15 years. "Can I ask a question?" Lucas said, breaking the silence as he nervously fiddled with the linen napkin. "Sure. Why did you bring me here? I mean, it's not normal for a businessman to have lunch with a street kid." Gabriel almost smiled at the boy's brutal honesty. It was refreshing to talk to someone who had no ulterior motives or political agendas. "Honestly, I don't know." Gabriel took a sip of water and watched the activity below on the avenue. "Maybe it's because it's been a while since someone surprised me, or maybe because you reminded me that there are things you don't learn in an MBA." Lucas nodded slowly, as if processing the information. "My grandpa always said that real knowledge doesn't come from books. It comes from paying attention to the world. Your grandpa sounds like a wise man." He was. Lucas's voice dropped, laden with a nostalgia that seemed too big to fit in his thin chest. "He raised me since I was a baby. My mum, well, she had drug problems. I never knew my dad." Gabriel felt a knot in his stomach. His own childhood, despite the difficulties. In the financial world, he had been privileged compared to the story that began to unfold in front of him. "And what happened after your grandfather died?" "The house was rented. I couldn't pay. I tried some jobs. But who's going to hire a 15-year-old kid without proper documents?" Lucas shrugged, but Gabriel noticed it was a rehearsed gesture to hide the pain. "So I went to the streets. At least there, no one pretends to care." The waiter arrived at that moment with the dishes, interrupting the conversation. Lucas looked at the grilled salmon with shrimp risotto as if it were a work of art. "Dude," he murmured, "how much does this cost?" "It doesn't matter. Eat." Lucas carefully picked up the fork with reverence and tasted the first piece. His expression changed completely. His eyes widened, and a genuine smile lit up his face. "My God, this is the best food I've ever eaten in my life." Gabriel felt something stir inside his chest again. When was the last time he had truly savored a meal? In recent months, food had become merely fuel, something mechanical consumed between meetings and calls. "Lucas," Gabriel said after a few minutes of contemplative silence, "tell me something. How did you really learn so much about cars?" The boy chewed thoughtfully before responding. "My grandpa worked at a garage in East Harlem after he retired from Ford. It was a bit of a shady place, you know. He took care of people who couldn't afford to take their cars to the dealership." Lucas took a sip of soda and continued. "Since I was little, I would hang out there with him. First just watching, then he let me hold the tools, and after a while I was really helping. And you can diagnose problems just by the sound. Not just by sound, by smell too. Each problem has a different smell." Lucas got excited talking about it, his posture becoming more upright. "An oil leak has one smell. An exhaust problem has another. A fuel pump has yet another. It's like—" he searched for the right words. "It's like the car is a patient, and the symptoms are always the same for the same diseases." Gabriel was impressed by the medical analogy. The boy had a systematic yet intuitive way of thinking. "And where are you sleeping these days?" Gabriel asked, changing the subject. Lucas hesitated again. "Around. There are some places under the overpass, store awnings. Nothing special." "Nothing special?" Gabriel repeated, incredulous. "Kid, you're 15. And so what?" Lucas looked him directly in the eye. "Mr. Gabriel, with all due respect, you have no idea what the streets are like. They have their own rules, and those who don't follow them don't survive. I've survived 3 years alone. That's no small feat." Gabriel recognized the wounded pride in the boy's voice. It was the same tone he used when someone questioned his business decisions. The difference was that Lucas's pride had been forged in the necessity of survival, not in corporate competition. "You're right," Gabriel admitted. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to belittle." Lucas seemed surprised by the apology. "It's okay. It's hard when people feel pity. Pity doesn't solve anything. It just makes everyone feel bad." They ate in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Gabriel watched the boy eat with the care of someone who didn't know when the next decent meal would come, and it made him reflect on his own life of wasted abundance. "Lucas," he finally said, "what do you want to do with your life? I mean, if you could choose anything." The boy stopped eating and stared out the window for a long moment. "You know, Mr. Gabriel, that's a question I never thought anyone would ask me." "Why?" "Because on the streets, you don't think about the future, you think about surviving the day. Tomorrow is a luxury that the poor can't afford." Gabriel felt as if he had been slapped. His own obsession with strategic planning, 5-year projections and long-term goals seemed ridiculously privileged in light of the raw reality Lucas had just exposed. "But if you could dream," Gabriel gently insisted. Lucas smiled for the first time during lunch, a shy, almost childlike smile. "I wanted to have a garage, not one of those backyard ones, but a real garage, with modern equipment, a diagnostic computer, everything. And I wanted to specialize in classic cars, you know, restoration. My grandpa always said that classic cars are like elderly people. They have history, they have personality. They just need someone who understands and has patience." Gabriel felt a shiver run down his spine. There was a genuine passion in the boy's voice when he talked about his dreams, something he himself had lost years ago amidst spreadsheets and financial reports. "That's a beautiful dream," Gabriel said sincerely. "It's just a dream," Lucas replied, returning to reality. "To have a garage, you need money, documents, those things I don't have." Gabriel stared at the boy for a long moment, an idea beginning to take shape in his mind. It was a crazy idea, impulsive, completely out of his rational behavior pattern. But maybe that was exactly what his life needed, a little madness. "Lucas," he said, slowly, "how do you feel about working with air conditioning?" The boy looked at him confused. "Air conditioning? I know the basics. Why?" Gabriel smiled for the first time in months. A genuine smile, not the professional expression he wore in meetings. "Because I think I have a proposal for you." The penthouse of Anderson Construction on the 32nd floor was a perfect reflection of Gabriel's personality. Functional, elegant, and imposing. The 400-square-meter space combined executive office with meeting room, decorated in shades of grey and dark wood, with touches of green from the plants carefully arranged by the landscaper his ex-wife had hired years before. Now, 3 days after lunch at the... Gabriel observed Lucas examining the air conditioning system that had cost $300,000 and had been malfunctioning for 2 weeks. "The problem isn't mechanical," Lucas murmured, more to himself than to Gabriel, as he climbed a ladder to inspect one of the vents near the ceiling. "It's electronic." Ms. Marlene, Gabriel's executive assistant for 15 years, watched the scene with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. At 53, she had seen Gabriel make many impulsive decisions, but never something like bringing a street kid to solve technical problems at the company. Her greying hair was impeccably styled in a low bun, and her keen brown eyes missed no movement of the boy. "Mr. Gabriel," she said softly, "are you sure about this? I've already called 3 specialized companies. They all said the entire system would need to be replaced." Gabriel adjusted his tie, a nervous gesture that Marlene recognized as a sign that he was doubting himself. "Marlene, we've already spent $15,000 on consultations that didn't solve anything. What harm can it do to let the kid take a look?" Lucas came down from the ladder and headed to the central control panel, a sophisticated German device with a digital display and dozens of buttons. His fingers glided over the controls with almost surgical precision, as if he were playing a musical instrument. "Miss Marlene," Lucas said, without taking his eyes off the panel, "can you tell me exactly when the problem started?" Marlene hesitated for a moment, still unaccustomed to receiving technical questions from a barefoot teenager wearing a T-shirt that Gabriel had bought for him at a nearby department store. "It was 2 weeks ago, on a Monday morning. We arrived, and it was unbearably hot in here. The system was running, but it wasn't cooling properly." "And did it rain the previous weekend?" "Yes, it rained. A lot." Marlene looked at Gabriel in surprise. "How do you know that?" Lucas smiled and pointed to the ceiling. "Because the problem is moisture infiltration in the control panel. Look." He opened a small side compartment of the equipment and revealed wires showing clear signs of corrosion. "Water got in here, oxidized the contacts, and now the system can't read the ambient temperature correctly." Gabriel leaned in for a better look. "How did you figure that out?" "By the smell," Lucas replied simply. "Infiltration has a characteristic smell. Besides, the noise the compressor makes when it's overworking is different from the normal sound." Ms. Marlene crossed her arms and studied the boy with an expression that Gabriel recognized. It was the same one she used when analyzing contracts for dubious clauses. "And can you fix it?" she asked. "I can, but I'll need some parts. Nothing expensive, about $50 at most." Lucas closed the panel and turned to Gabriel. "The problem is that you'll need to turn off the system for about 4 hours while I clean and replace the components." Gabriel looked at Marlene, who nodded slowly. "Okay, we can do that on Saturday when there's no one in the office." "Perfect," Lucas said, and then his expression turned more serious. "But Mr. Gabriel, I need to tell you something." "Go ahead." I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of the situation. If you want to pay something for the service, that's fine. But I don't want it to seem like I came here just for that." Marlene and Gabriel exchanged a meaningful glance. There was a dignity in the boy's speech that impressed them both. "Lucas," Gabriel said calmly, "if you fix this system, you will have earned your payment. It's work, not charity." The boy's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Thank you, Mr. Gabriel." At that moment, the office door opened, and Mr. Roberts, Gabriel's minority partner and head of the company's finance department, walked in. At 40, Mr. Roberts maintained the appearance of an eternal young executive, gelled hair, slim-fit suit, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He stopped abruptly upon seeing Lucas. "Gabriel, who is the kid?" "Lucas Smith. He's helping us." "With a technical problem." Mr. Roberts frowned and approached Gabriel, speaking in a low but audible tone. "You brought a street kid into the office? Gabriel, this is madness. What about security and the company's image?" Gabriel felt his jaw tighten. "Mr. Roberts, the kid is here because he has technical skills that the specialized companies have failed to demonstrate." "Technical skills?" Mr. Roberts laughed, an unpleasant sound. "Gabriel, for heaven's sake, get back to reality. This kid probably can't even read properly." Lucas, who had pretended not to hear the conversation, slowly turned to Mr. Roberts. His brown eyes shone with a coldness that Gabriel had never seen before. "Sorry to interrupt," Lucas said with exaggerated politeness that made his sarcasm clear, "but I can read just fine. And I also know that moisture infiltration in air conditioning systems is responsible for 60% of problems in commercial buildings in New York. I also know that replacing an entire system when the problem is just with the control sensors is a waste of money. But maybe you prefer to spend $300,000 instead of 50, right? After all, it's not your money." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Roberts turned red with anger, Marlene stifled a smile, and Gabriel felt a mix of pride and concern for the boy's courage. "Excuse me." Mr. Roberts addressed Gabriel in a controlled voice, but it was evident that he was furious. "I need to talk to you, privately." Gabriel nodded, and the two headed to an adjacent conference room. Through the glass walls, Lucas could see them animatedly discussing, but he couldn't hear the words. Marlene approached him. "You were brave," she said softly, "but maybe you were too brave." Lucas shrugged. "Ms. Marlene, I lived 3 years on the streets. If I never learned to defend myself against people who belittle me, I didn't learn anything." Ms. Marlene studied the boy for a moment, recognizing something familiar in his determination. "You remind me of my son," she said softly. "Do you have a son?" "I did." Ms. Marlene's voice became almost inaudible. "John. He died 5 years ago in a motorcycle accident. He was 17. Lucas felt the weight of her words and didn't know how to respond. Ms. Marlene continued, as if speaking more to herself than to him. He also had that stubbornness, that desire to prove he was right even when everyone doubted him. She looked at Lucas with tear-filled eyes. "That's why I'm going to hope that Mr. Gabriel gives you a chance, because every boy deserves to have someone believe in him." In the conference room, the discussion between Gabriel and Mr. Roberts was intensifying. "Gabriel, you've completely lost your mind." Mr. Roberts gestured nervously. "First, the divorce leaves you depressed, and now you're adopting street kids as a social project? This is a business, not a charity. Rodrigo, the boy diagnosed a problem in 5 minutes that 3 specialized companies couldn't solve. And so, that doesn't change the fact that he's a security risk, a public relations problem, and probably going to steal something." Gabriel turned sharply to face his partner. "Watch what you say, Rodrigo." "Gabriel, seriously, what's happening to you?" Since the divorce, you've been making strange decisions. First, you want to cancel the shopping mall project in Westchester. Now this. The Westchester project is a financial mistake, and you know it. The projections are inflated. The projections are conservative. Gabriel, that project will yield 50 million in 2 years. Gabriel studied Mr. Roberts' face and noticed something that bothered him, but he couldn't identify exactly what it was. There was an anxiety in his partner's insistence that seemed disproportionate. Rodrigo, we're going to do this my way. The boy will fix the air conditioning on Saturday. If it works out, maybe I'll find him other jobs. And if it goes wrong, I'll take responsibility. Mr. Roberts sighed dramatically. All right, Gabriel, but when this becomes a problem, and it will, remember that I warned you. When they returned to the main office, they found Lucas and Miss Marlene whispering near the window. The boy had drawn a diagram of the air conditioning system on a piece of paper, explaining to her how the repair he intended to make would work. Lucas, Gabriel called. It's all set. Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. Can you be here? I can, Mr. Gabriel. Great. Ms. Marlene will give you my card with the phone number. If there's any problem, call me. Lucas took the card as if it were an official document, carefully tucking it into the pocket of his shorts. Can I ask one more question? Of course. Why are you doing this, really? Gabriel hesitated, looking out the window at the city below. It was a question he had asked himself several times in the last 3 days. Because, he finally said, it's been a long time since someone showed me that there is a different way to see things, and maybe I need to learn. Lucas nodded, as if the answer made all the sense in the world. See you on Saturday, Mr. Gabriel. When the boy left, Ms. Marlene approached Gabriel. Mr. Gabriel, can I give you an opinion? Sure. That boy is special. But be careful with Mr. Roberts. He didn't like this story. At all. Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. I know, Ms. Marlene. I know. Saturday dawned, with a sky heavy with dark clouds threatening rain, typical for late February in New York. When Gabriel arrived at the office at 7:40 in the morning, he found Lucas already waiting at the building's entrance, carrying a borrowed small toolbox and a plastic bag with the parts he had bought in the electronics district the day before. The boy was wearing his usual denim shorts, but he had a new shirt, a navy blue polo that Gabriel had insisted on buying, along with a pair of used sneakers they found at a thrift store. Good morning, Mr. Gabriel, Lucas greeted with an anxious smile. I arrived early because I didn't want to be late. How long have you been waiting here? Lucas shrugged, trying to appear casual. About 2 hours. I didn't have much to do anyway. Gabriel felt a tightness in his chest, imagining the boy waiting alone on the sidewalk since 6 in the morning, but he decided not to comment to avoid embarrassing him. They took the mirrored elevator together, and Gabriel watched Lucas nervously check if all the tools were in the box. Nervous? Gabriel asked. A little, Lucas admitted. It's just, if I can't fix it, it will seem like I was just bragging. And if you can, Lucas smiled, and for the first time, Gabriel saw a glimmer of true confidence in the boy's eyes. If I can, maybe you'll stop thinking I'm just another street kid. The penthouse was quiet and slightly cool when they arrived. Gabriel turned on the lights and watched Lucas head straight for the air conditioning control panel, as if he had already memorized the exact location of each component. First, I'm going to turn off the main circuit breaker, Lucas explained, more to himself than to Gabriel. Then I'll open the panel, clean the oxidized contacts with isopropyl alcohol, and replace the temperature and humidity sensors. Gabriel settled into a nearby armchair, fascinated by the transformation he was observing in the boy. On the streets, Lucas had the defensive posture of someone always ready to flee or hide. Here, working with his hands, he moved with a confidence and precision that seemed natural, almost instinctive. "My grandpa always said that a job well done is a matter of respect," Lucas murmured as he carefully disassembled the electronic components. Respect for the tool, respect for the equipment, and respect for those who will use it. "Your grandpa sounds like he was a very important person. You—" Lucas paused his work for a moment, holding a small sensor in the palm of his hand. "He was everything I had, and I think I was everything he had too, after my grandmother passed away." "What was your relationship like?" "Difficult at first," Lucas replied, returning to his work. "When my mom left me with him, I was 5 years old and angry at everyone. I broke things, yelled, ran away from home. But my grandpa had infinite patience. He said that a kid with anger is like an unregulated engine. It needs time and care to work right again." Gabriel observed the boy's skilled hands delicately cleaning the electronic contacts and wondered when was the last time he himself had done any manual work. His childhood had been filled with books, studies, and the constant pressure to be someone in life. But he had never learned the value of physical work, of creating with his hands. "And how did he teach you about mechanics?" "Little by little. First, he let me just watch, then hold the tools, then explained how each part worked." Lucas installed the first new sensor and tested the connection. He said that true knowledge isn't taught in a hurry. You have to let the person discover at their own pace. An hour later, Lucas was soldering the last wire when Ms. Marlene arrived, carrying a thermal bag and dressed in casual clothes, the first time Gabriel had seen her without her usual business suit. "I brought coffee and sandwiches for you guys," she said, watching Lucas's work with approval. "How's it going?" "Almost done, Ms. Marlene," Lucas replied, without taking his eyes off the soldering. "Just another 15 minutes, and we can test it." Marlene approached Gabriel and said quietly, "I brought some clothes from my nephew. They're his size. They might fit." Gabriel looked at the extra bag Ms. Marlene was carrying and felt a wave of gratitude for the secretary's thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Marlene, that's very kind." "It's not kindness, it's necessity," she replied pragmatically. "If the boy is going to work here occasionally, he needs to look presentable." When Lucas finished the repair, the three gathered in front of the control panel. The boy was visibly nervous, checking all the connections once more before turning the system back on. "Ready," he finally said. "I'm going to turn it on." The panel lit up normally, but for a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the familiar sound of the compressors activating echoed through the space, followed by the gentle whisper of cold air starting to circulate. Lucas checked the digital display, which now showed accurate readings of temperature and humidity. A smile of pure relief lit up his face. "It worked," he said simply. Ms. Marlene clapped, and Gabriel felt an euphoria he hadn't experienced in months, not because the air conditioning was working, but because of the genuine pride on the boy's face. "Lucas," Gabriel said, "that was impressive. You saved the company at least $250,000. "It was nothing, Mr. Gabriel. It was just a matter of identifying the right problem. Maybe it was nothing to you, but it means a lot to me." Gabriel paused for a moment, as if making an important decision. "I want to make you a proposal." Lucas looked at him with cautious expectation. "How about working here regularly? Nothing official yet because you will need documents, but I can pay you as a freelance contractor. Building maintenance, small repairs, those kinds of things." Lucas's eyes widened. "Really?" "Very seriously. $500 a week to start, and we'll get your documents in order." Lucas remained silent for such a long moment that Gabriel began to worry he had offered too little money. Then he noticed that the boy's eyes were misty. "Mr. Gabriel," Lucas said with a choked voice, "it's been 3 years since anyone trusted me with anything. Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Lucas nodded vigorously, as if he didn't trust his own voice to respond. Ms. Marlene, who had been watching the scene with bright eyes, stepped forward and placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. "Welcome to the team, Lucas." At that moment, Gabriel's phone rang. It was Mr. Roberts, and his voice sounded tense even through the speakerphone. "Gabriel, I need to see you urgently. A serious problem has come up with the Westchester project." "What kind of problem?" "I can't talk over the phone. Can you come to the office now?" Gabriel looked at Lucas and Ms. Marlene. "I'm here." With Ms. Marlene and Lucas, the air conditioning is working perfectly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The kid managed to fix it?" "He did, and very well." Another pause, longer this time. "Gabriel, seriously, I need to talk to you. It's about the Westchester contracts. Can you come alone?" Gabriel frowned. "Mr. Roberts, if it's about the company, Ms. Marlene needs to be involved. She knows all the contracts." "Gabriel," Mr. Roberts's voice sounded almost desperate. "Please, just you, it's important." Gabriel looked at Ms. Marlene, who returned his gaze with a worried expression. In 15 years of working together, she had rarely seen Mr. Roberts exclude her from discussions about contracts. "All right," Gabriel finally said. "I'll be there in an hour." When he hung up, Ms. Marlene approached. "Mr. Gabriel, something isn't right. Mr. Roberts never excludes me from meetings about contracts." Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. "I know, Marlene. I found it strange, too." Lucas, who had been silently observing the conversation, cleaned up the tools and closed the box. "Mr. Gabriel, can I give an opinion?" "Of course. Out on the street, we learn to identify when someone is scared, and your partner sounded very scared." Gabriel studied the boy's serious face. "Scared of what, do you think?" "I don't know, but people who are scared sometimes do stupid things. It's good to be careful." Marlene and Gabriel exchanged a meaningful glance. The 15-year-old had identified something they themselves were feeling but couldn't name. "Lucas is right," Ms. Marlene finally said. "Mr. Gabriel, be careful with Mr. Roberts. And if you need anything, call me." As he prepared to leave, Gabriel looked out the window of the penthouse at the city stretching to the horizon. Something was changing in his life, and he didn't know if he was ready for the consequences. But one thing was certain: for the first time in months, he felt alive again. Mr. Roberts's office was on the 28th floor of the same building, 4 floors below the penthouse. When Gabriel arrived, he found his partner pacing nervously back and forth, his hair disheveled and his dress shirt wrinkled, a completely different image from the impeccably dressed executive he had known for 8 years. "Gabriel, thanks for coming," Mr. Roberts said bluntly, gesturing for him to sit in one of the leather chairs. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Gabriel settled in, crossing his legs and closely observing his partner's body language. His experiences as a businessman had taught him that often what wasn't said was more important than the words. "I'm listening." Mr. Roberts stopped pacing and positioned himself behind his executive desk as if he needed the physical barrier for protection. "It's about Westchester and some investments I made on behalf of the company." "What kind of investments?" "Gabriel, do you remember when I said I had some contacts in Washington? People who could facilitate the approval of construction permits?" Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. "I remember, and I made it clear that I didn't want to get involved in that kind of thing." I know, but the opportunity was too good to pass up." Mr. Roberts began pacing again, avoiding Gabriel's gaze. "The Westchester project, well, it was only approved because I paid some facilitation fees." "Jesus Christ, Mr. Roberts. Gabriel stood up abruptly. You paid a bribe? It wasn't a bribe. They were consulting fees, all within the law. Consulting for what? For whom? Mr. Roberts hesitated, and Gabriel realized there was much more behind the story. For some people in the state government and some shell companies. Shell companies, Gabriel repeated, feeling the blood rush to his head. Mr. Roberts, explain to me exactly what you did. Gabriel, calm down. Let me explain everything. Mr. Roberts sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 40 years. 6 months ago, a guy approached me. He claimed to represent a group of investors interested in real estate projects in Greater New York. They offered $15 million to our company in exchange for a share of the profits from Westchester. And you agreed without consulting me? I was going to consult you, but they said the offer had a deadline, and you were kind of absent because of the divorce. Gabriel clenched his fists, struggling to maintain control. Continue. The money came through various small transfers from different companies, everything apparently legal, but last night I received a call. From whom? From the FBI. The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. The FBI, Gabriel repeated slowly, called you last night. Yes, they are investigating a money laundering operation, and some of the companies that invested in our project are involved. Gabriel sank back into the chair, suddenly feeling very tired. Mr. Roberts, do you have any idea of the mess you've made? Gabriel, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know it was dirty money. Didn't know? Gabriel stared at him incredulously. $15 million appeared out of nowhere, from companies you had never heard of, and you didn't find that suspicious. Mr. Roberts lowered his head, and Gabriel saw that his hands were trembling slightly. I was desperate, Gabriel. The company wasn't doing well. You were kind of absent, and I thought it was our chance to turn things around. Our company was doing well. We had positive cash flow, projects underway, a solid reputation built over 20 years. Gabriel, you don't understand. I have doubts, many doubts. Gabriel stopped speaking and studied his partner's face. What kind of doubts? Mr. Roberts hesitated for a moment, then sighed deeply. Gambling, Gabriel. I have a gambling problem. The revelation hit Gabriel like a punch. In 8 years of partnership, he had never suspected. How long? It started about 3 years ago. At first, it was just some sports betting. Then it moved to online casinos, and then I started going to some underground clubs downtown. Gabriel felt nauseous. How much do you owe? $2.5 million. $2.5 million, Gabriel repeated, incredulous. And they're not the type of people who accept late payments. Gabriel fell silent for a long moment, processing the information. His company, his reputation, his life, everything was being put at risk because of his partner's vices. Mr. Roberts, he finally said, his voice controlled but cold. I want you to give me all the information about these transfers, all the contracts, all the contacts, everything. Gabriel, what are you going to do? I'm going to try to clean up the mess you made before the FBI knocks on our door. At that moment, Gabriel's phone rang. It was Ms. Marlene. Mr. Gabriel, her voice sounded tense. Can you come back upstairs? Some people have shown up wanting to talk to you. What kind of people? They say they're from the IRS. Gabriel closed his eyes and felt the world crumble around him. I'm coming up. When he hung up, Mr. Roberts was as pale as a sheet. Gabriel, I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to come to this. Mr. Roberts, listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you, Gabriel said, standing up and heading for the door. You're going to sort out your mess. And if I find out that you've hidden anything from me, I will sue you until you have nothing left. Gabriel climbed the 4 flights of stairs, needing time to think before facing the situation. When he reached the penthouse, he found 2 men in suits. Gabriel was talking to Ms. Marlene, who looked visibly nervous. Lucas was sitting in a corner, observing everything attentively. "Mr. Gabriel Anderson?" one of the men approached, showing an official document. "I am Officer John Smith from the IRS. We need to discuss some financial transactions related to your company." Gabriel took a deep breath, activating the business survival mode he had developed over the years. "Of course. How can I assist you?" "We received some information regarding irregular financial transfers involving Anderson Construction. We would like to examine some documents." "What kind of documents?" "Bank statements from the last 6 months, service contracts, especially related to the residential project in Westchester." Gabriel felt sweat beginning to form in the palms of his hands, but maintained a neutral expression. "Ms. Marlene, can you prepare the documents they are requesting?" "Sure, Mr. Gabriel." As Ms. Marlene headed to the filing cabinet, Gabriel noticed that Lucas had stood up and was paying attention to the conversation without interrupting. There was something in the boy's posture that reassured him, a silent solidarity. "Mr. Anderson," said the second officer, "were you aware that some of the companies that invested in your project are being investigated for money laundering?" "I was not," Gabriel replied honestly. "All financial transactions were handled by my partner, Mr. Roberts." The officers exchanged a significant glance. "And where is Mr. Roberts now?" "In his office, 4 floors down." "We will need to speak with him as well." Gabriel nodded, knowing there was no way to avoid the inevitable. "Of course." In the next 20 minutes, while the officers examined documents and took notes, Gabriel discreetly observed Lucas. The boy remained quiet, but his attentive eyes missed no detail of the situation. There was a maturity in his observation that impressed Gabriel, as if he instinctively understood the gravity of the moment. When the officers finally left, taking copies of several documents and promising to return on Monday with more questions, Gabriel let himself fall into a chair, exhausted. "Mr. Gabriel," Ms. Marlene approached cautiously. "What is happening?" Gabriel looked at her and Lucas, people who had become important in his life at different times, and decided to be honest. "It seems that Mr. Roberts has gotten our company into very serious trouble," he said, quickly summarizing the conversation he had had with his partner. Ms. Marlene turned pale. "My God, Mr. Gabriel, what now?" "Now we need to figure out a way out of this." Lucas, who had remained silent throughout the account, approached hesitantly. "Mr. Gabriel, can I say something?" Gabriel nodded. "Out on the street, we learn that there is always a way out. Sometimes it's not the way you want, but there's always one." Lucas paused for a moment, choosing his words. "And you also learn that when you're in a bind, it's better to have trustworthy people by your side than to try to solve everything alone." Gabriel looked at the 15-year-old boy who just a week ago was a complete stranger and felt an unexpected gratitude for his presence. "There. Thank you, Lucas. You're right." Ms. Marlene came closer and placed her hand on Gabriel's shoulder. "Mr. Gabriel, whatever happens, we will face it together. I won't abandon this company, and I'm sure Lucas won't either." Lucas nodded vigorously. "Mr. Gabriel, I don't understand anything about business, but I understand loyalty, and you were loyal to me when no one else was." Gabriel felt his eyes welling up. During months of divorce and loneliness, he had forgotten what it was like to have people who genuinely cared about him. Now, at the most difficult moment of his career, he discovered he was not alone. Monday arrived with the typical grey sky of autumn in New York and a light drizzle that seemed to reflect the somber mood that had settled over Anderson Construction. Gabriel arrived at the office at 6 in the morning, 2 hours earlier than usual. carrying a briefcase full of documents he had reviewed all weekend. The deep bags under his eyes evidenced the sleepless nights, and the suit, although impeccable as always, could not disguise the weight he carried on his shoulders. Lucas was already on the rooftop when Gabriel arrived, organizing a borrowed toolbox, and wearing a mechanic's jumpsuit that Ms. Marlene had managed to get from her nephew. The boy had spent Sunday helping with the maintenance of some equipment in the building, a way to stay useful while Gabriel dealt with the crisis. "Good morning, Mr. Gabriel," Lucas greeted, immediately noticing the tense expression on the businessman's face. "How was your weekend?" "Complicated, Lucas. Very complicated." Gabriel poured himself a coffee that Ms. Marlene had prepared and left in a thermos. "I spent both days reviewing contracts and trying to understand the extent of the problem." "Did you manage to figure anything out?" Gabriel sighed deeply. "I discovered that the situation is worse than I imagined. Mr. Roberts not only accepted money from suspicious companies, he forged some of my signatures on documents I've never seen." Lucas stopped what he was doing and turned completely to Gabriel. "He forged your signature?" "On at least 3 contracts. Contracts that make me jointly responsible for operations I didn't even know existed." "That's a crime, isn't it?" "It is. And the worst part is that, legally, I am the majority partner in the company, so even if I prove that I knew nothing, I can still be held civilly liable." At that moment, Ms. Marlene arrived, carrying her usual bag and a worried expression that had become constant since Saturday. At 53 years old, she had seen many business crises, but nothing compared to the severity of the current situation. "Mr. Gabriel," she said, hanging up her coat, "the IRS called a little while ago. They will arrive at 9 in the morning with more documents to analyze." "And Mr. Roberts?" "I haven't been able to reach him since Saturday. I called several times, but the phone goes straight to voicemail." Gabriel frowned. In 8 years of partnership, Mr. Roberts had never been unreachable. It had been a long time, especially in moments of crisis. "Ms. Marlene, can you go to his house, check if everything is all right?" "Of course, Mr. Gabriel." Before Marlene could leave, the office phone rang. Gabriel answered with a sense of apprehension that had become constant. "Gabriel." The voice on the other end was Claire, his ex-wife. "I need to talk to you urgently." Gabriel felt his stomach tighten. Claire hadn't called him since the divorce was finalized 3 months ago. "What happened, Claire?" "Can you come to my house?" "It's better not to talk over the phone. Claire, I'm in the middle of a crisis here at the company. I can't leave right now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Gabriel, it's about this crisis that I need to talk to you. I know about Rodrigo." Gabriel almost dropped the phone. "You know what? Gabriel, please come here. It's important." Gabriel looked at Marlene and Lucas, who were watching the conversation with worried expressions. "All right, I'll be there in an hour." When he hung up, Marlene approached him. "Mr. Gabriel, what could your ex-wife know about Rodrigo?" "I have no idea, but from her tone of voice it's not good." Lucas, who had remained silent during the conversation, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Gabriel, do you want me to go with you?" Gabriel looked at the boy, surprised by the offer. "Why?" "Because sometimes it's good to have someone from the outside to observe things. I don't know your ex-wife, so I might notice things that you might not." It was a strange suggestion, but there was a practical wisdom in Lucas's words that Gabriel had learned to respect. "All right, but you'll stay in the car while I talk to her." Agreed. Claire's house was in the Upper East Side, on a 1,000-square-foot lot surrounded by tall walls and electronic gates. It was the house where Gabriel had lived for 15 years, the place where he had dreamed of raising children that never came, and building a family life that had slowly crumbled like a sandcastle touched by the waves. During the 40-minute drive through the heavy morning traffic of New York, Gabriel watched Lucas silently absorb the changing landscape from the commercial buildings of Fifth Avenue to the tree-lined mansions of the upscale neighborhoods. It's impressive how New York is different depending on the area, isn't it, Mr. Gabriel? Lucas commented, observing a house with a huge garden and pool. It's like there are several cities in one. That's true. You've never been to this area before? Never. Back in the outskirts, we hear about these places, but they seem like they're from another world. Lucas paused. It's strange to think that you lived in a house like that and left it all behind to start over. Gabriel frowned. What do you mean I left it all behind? Well, you got divorced, left the house, and now you're starting a new life. It's kind of like what happened to me when my grandpa died, only you chose it. The observation hit Gabriel unexpectedly. He had never thought of the divorce as a choice to start over, but rather as a failure to be overcome. When they arrived at the house, Gabriel asked Lucas to wait for him in the car and walk through the garden he had helped plan years before. Claire welcomed him at the door, 42 years old, carefully styled blonde hair, wearing a business suit that cost more than the monthly salary of many people. "Gabriel," she said, and there was a genuine concern in her voice that he hadn't heard in years. "Come in." The living room was exactly as Gabriel remembered it, decorated in neutral tones with Italian designer furniture and carefully selected artwork. Claire led him to the sofa, where they used to watch movies in the early years of their marriage. "Claire, explain to me what's going on." She sat down in the armchair across from him, maintaining a physical distance that reflected the emotional distance between them. "Gabriel, 2 weeks ago I received a visit. A man who said he was a private investigator. He asked questions about you, about the company, about your friendships." Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of questions?" "About your relationship with Rodrigo, about changes in your behavior in recent months, about our separation. And did you respond?" "I said I had nothing to say." Claire hesitated. "But Gabriel, he knew things I had never told anyone." "What kind of things?" "About the arguments you two had last year regarding the direction of the company, about you questioning some of Rodrigo's investments, about—" She paused, as if she couldn't continue. "About what, Claire?" "About you finding out that I knew about Rodrigo's gambling problem for over a year and never told you." Gabriel was silent for a moment, processing the information. "You knew? For over a year?" "Gabriel, I'm so sorry. I found out by accident at a company holiday party. I saw Rodrigo talking on the phone about gambling debts, but I thought it wasn't my business, and you two were already kind of distant because of our problems." "Jesus Christ, Claire!" Gabriel stood up abruptly. "You could have told me. You could have avoided this whole catastrophe." I know, and I regret it every day." Claire also stood up, and for the first time in months, Gabriel saw genuine emotion in her eyes. "But Gabriel, the investigator knew that. He knew I knew, and that I didn't tell you. How could he know that?" Gabriel began to walk around the room, trying to organize his thoughts. "Claire, did this investigator, did he say who he was working for?" "He didn't say. But he made it clear that he was investigating suspicious financial activities involving your company. And do you believe he was telling the truth about being a private investigator?" Claire hesitated. "I don't know, Gabriel. There was something about him that made me very uncomfortable. It seemed more dangerous than professional." Gabriel stopped walking and looked out the window at the garden where Lucas was waiting in the car. The boy was intently watching the activity on the street, as if he were on guard. "Gabriel," Claire continued, "there's one more thing, about why I really asked for the divorce." Gabriel slowly turned to face her. "What do you mean?" I didn't ask for the divorce just because of our personal problems. I asked because I was scared. Scared of what? Of Mr. Roberts. Over the last 2 years, he started bringing different people to our house, people that made me uncomfortable. And he started making strange comments about money, about opportunities, about how you guys could grow very quickly. Gabriel felt the world spin around him. And you never told me any of this? I tried, Gabriel. Remember the time I said I didn't like Mr. Roberts's new friends? You said I was being prejudiced. Gabriel vaguely recalled the conversation, but at the time he was too absorbed in the problems of the marriage to pay real attention to Claire's concerns about business matters. Gabriel, she said softly, I think you need to be very careful. I think Mr. Roberts has put you in a situation that's much more dangerous than you realize. Gabriel nodded slowly, feeling the weight of all the revelations. When he left the house 20 minutes later, he carried more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that his life had become much more complicated than any business crisis he had ever faced. In the car, Lucas watched him closely. From the sound of the conversation, it wasn't good. Was it Mr. Gabriel? No, Lucas, it wasn't. Gabriel started the engine but didn't drive off immediately. Lucas, can I ask you a strange question? Sure. Have you ever felt like your whole life was a lie? That the people around you weren't who you thought they were? Lucas was silent for a moment, looking out the window. Yes, Mr. Gabriel. When my mum abandoned me with my grandfather, it took time for me to understand that the woman I thought loved me had problems that were bigger than her love for me. Gabriel looked at the boy and felt a strange comfort in his early wisdom. But you know what my grandfather taught me, Lucas continued, that when you find out you've been deceived, you have two choices. You can get angry and become a bad person, or you can use that knowledge to make better choices moving forward. Gabriel nodded, started the car, and began the drive back to the office, carrying the certainty that the coming hours would bring more revelations that would change his life forever. March arrived in New York with the promise of changes that were in the warm, humid air typical of late summer. The rehearsals of the samba schools echoed through the streets of the city, creating a festive soundtrack that dramatically contrasted with the tension that had settled at Anderson Construction. Gabriel had spent the last 2 weeks navigating between lawyers, accountants, and investigators, trying to understand the real extent of the situation created by Mr. Roberts, who remained missing. Lucas, now officially registered as a building maintenance assistant with documents that Ms. Marlene had helped provide, quietly observed the transformations happening around him. The boy had developed a routine. He arrived at 7 in the morning, checked all the building's equipment, organized maintenance reports with a precision that impressed Gabriel, and remained discreetly available for any task that arose. On that particular Tuesday morning, Gabriel was in his office when Ms. Marlene entered with an expression he had learned to recognize as bearing bad news. "Mr. Gabriel," she said, closing the door behind her, "a court summons has arrived. The FBI is formally investigating the company for money laundering and corruption." Gabriel received the document with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a controlled anger that had grown over the past weeks. "And the lawyer, what did he say?" "Dr. Anderson is coming here at 10 o'clock. He said the situation is serious, but we have a chance to prove your innocence if we can show that you had no knowledge of Mr. Roberts' activities." "Innocence," Gabriel repeated bitterly. "Ms. Marlene, I may not have known about the criminal activities, but I was negligent. I let my partner conduct financial operations without proper oversight." Lucas, who was organizing some documents at a nearby table, looked up. "Mr. Gabriel, can I ask a question?" "You can, Lucas. Do you know the people Mr. Roberts was hanging out with? Those different people your ex-wife mentioned?" Gabriel frowned. "No, why? It's just that..." Lucas hesitated, as if organizing his thoughts. Out on the street, when someone disappears out of nowhere, it's usually for two reasons. Either the person ran away because they did something wrong, or someone did something to the person. Ms. Marlene and Gabriel exchanged a worried glance. The possibility that something had happened to Mr. Roberts had not occurred to either of them. "Lucas is right," Ms. Marlene said slowly. "Mr. Gabriel, perhaps we should file a missing persons report about Mr. Roberts." Before Gabriel could respond, the secretary's phone rang. She answered quickly, spoke a few words in a low tone, and then turned to Gabriel with an even more worried expression. "Mr. Gabriel, there's someone at the reception saying they have information about Mr. Roberts. They say it's urgent." Gabriel felt his heart race. "What kind of person?" "A woman. She looks to be in her 30s. Says her name is Sandra, and that she worked for Mr. Roberts." "Worked for Mr. Roberts doing what?" Gabriel asked, already suspecting the answer. "She didn't say, but she's very nervous." Gabriel looked at Lucas, who had completely stopped his work and was paying full attention to the conversation. "Miss Marlene, send her up. And Lucas, can you stay? It might be good to have someone from outside observing." 5 minutes later, Sarah entered the room. A woman in her 30s, brunette, wearing jeans and a simple top, but carrying an expensive designer handbag that seemed out of place with the rest of her appearance. Her brown eyes were visibly anxious, and she kept glancing over her shoulder as if expecting to be followed. "Mr. Gabriel Anderson?" she asked in a nervous voice. "That's me. This is my secretary, Ms. Marlene, and this is Lucas, our assistant. Feel free to speak openly in front of them." Sarah sat on the edge of the chair, clearly ready to bolt at any moment. "Mr. Gabriel, I worked for your partner about 8 months ago." "What did you do?" Let's just say I handled some of his personal contacts, especially related to gambling." Gabriel nodded, understanding that Sarah was likely some sort of intermediary between Mr. Roberts and the illegal world of underground casinos. "And what do you have to tell me about Mr. Roberts?" Sarah took a deep breath before responding. "He's in hiding, Mr. Gabriel, but not by choice." "What do you mean?" "The people he owes money to. They found out about the FBI investigation. They thought Mr. Roberts was going to rat everyone out to save his own skin." Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. "And then they are keeping him in a safe place until this whole thing blows over." "Keeping him where?" "I don't know exactly where, but I know he's alive, for now." Sarah nervously glanced at the door. "Mr. Gabriel, these people are not a joke. They move a lot of money, have contacts in the police, in the government. If they think you could be a problem too—" "Are they threatening me?" Gabriel asked, his voice growing colder. No, at least not yet. But they are watching, and they know you didn't know anything. Mr. Roberts himself confirmed that to them." Lucas, who had remained quiet throughout the conversation, stepped forward. "Sarah, can I ask a question?" She looked at him in surprise, clearly not expecting a teenager to participate in the conversation. "Sure. Why did you come to warn Mr. Gabriel? Aren't you putting yourself in danger by doing this?" Sarah studied Lucas's face for a moment, and Gabriel noticed there was a sharp intelligence in the boy's question. "Because—" Sarah hesitated. "Because I have a 15-year-old daughter. And when I see you two here, it reminds me that not everyone in the business world is corrupt. I thought you deserved to know the truth." Ms. Marlene approached with water for Sarah, who gratefully accepted it. "Sarah, is there any way to help Mr. Roberts?" "Honestly, the only thing that can help Mr. Roberts right now is if the FBI investigation doesn't find anything that compromises his friends. If they can prove that Mr. Gabriel's company was used without his knowledge, and if Mr. Roberts cooperates without giving names, maybe he can get out of this alive." "And what if we can't?" Gabriel asked, although he feared the answer. Sarah didn't answer directly, but her expression said it all. After Sarah left, leaving a card with a phone number for emergencies only, Gabriel, Ms. Marlene and Lucas sat in silence for several minutes. "Mr. Gabriel," Ms. Marlene finally said, "I think we need to talk to the lawyer. About protection measures. For whom? For me?" "For all of us," Lucas interjected. "Mr. Gabriel, if these people think we could be a problem, they won't make a distinction between boss and employee." Gabriel looked at the 15-year-old boy who had become an integral part of his life in just a few weeks and felt a responsibility that went far beyond their professional relationship. "Lucas, you can go home. Go back to wherever you were before. This isn't your problem." Lucas stared at him with an expression that Gabriel recognized as pure determination. "Mr. Gabriel, with all due respect, but when someone gives me a chance to have a decent life, I don't abandon that person at the first sign of trouble. My grandpa taught me that loyalty isn't just for the good times." Ms. Marlene smiled for the first time in days. "Lucas is right, Mr. Gabriel. We will face this together." Gabriel felt a strange emotion forming in his chest, a mix of gratitude, fear, and something he hadn't felt in a long time. The sensation of having a true family, even if it wasn't traditional. "All right," he finally said, "but let's be smart about this. First, we'll meet with the lawyer and understand our legal options. Second, we'll reinforce security here in the building. And third—" "Third?" Ms. Marlene asked. Gabriel looked out the window at the city below, where millions of people were fighting their own daily battles. "Third, we will prove that a company can be honest even when partners are dishonest. We will turn this crisis into an opportunity to rebuild everything the right way." Lucas smiled and nodded. "My grandpa always said that iron is forged in fire. Maybe this is the time to find out what we are truly made of." Gabriel looked at the boy and Ms. Marlene, and for the first time in weeks he felt something like hope. The battle was just beginning, but at least he wasn't alone. April arrived in New York, bringing with it the first chilly drizzles of spring and a sense of change that seemed to permeate every corner of the city. The cherry blossom trees began to bloom, painting the streets in pink as Gabriel faced what would be the most challenging month of his business career. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's visit, and the FBI investigations had intensified dramatically. The routine in the office had completely changed. Gabriel now arrived at 6 in the morning and rarely left before 10 at night, closely accompanied by his lawyer, Dr. Henry Collins, a 60-year-old man with experience in financial crimes. Lucas had taken on responsibilities. Gabriel was far beyond his original role, becoming a sort of informal personal assistant, organizing documents and serving as a silent observer in important meetings. Ms. Marlene, in turn, had become the true backbone of the company's rescue operation. Her 15 years of experience with corporate bureaucracy were crucial for navigating the increasing legal demands. On this Thursday morning, Gabriel was reviewing contracts when Lucas entered the room with a worried expression that had become familiar in recent weeks. "Mr. Gabriel," the boy said, "there's a strange guy in the lobby. He's been there for 2 hours, pretending to read a newspaper, but I saw him taking pictures of the building." Gabriel lifted his head from the papers. Since the meeting with Sarah, he had developed a justified paranoia about surveillance. "Are you sure?" "I am. I went down twice to check. The first time, he was sitting at a table in the corner cafe. The second time, he was leaning against the pole in front of the bank, always with the same newspaper, always watching the entrance of the building." Ms. Marlene, who was organizing documents at a nearby table, approached. "Mr. Gabriel, maybe we should call security." "No," Gabriel replied after a moment of reflection. "If it's the people Sarah mentioned, calling security will only escalate the situation. Let's pretend we haven't noticed anything." Lucas nodded, but there was a tension in his shoulders that Gabriel recognized as the constant state of alert the boy had developed during his years on the street. "Mr. Gabriel, do you want me to keep an eye on him?" "No, Lucas. You stay inside. By the way," Gabriel paused, as if an important idea had emerged. "Lucas, do you still have contacts on the street? People you trust?" The boy hesitated. "I have a few. Why?" "Because maybe they can observe things we can't. People on the street are invisible to those looking for businessmen in suits." Lucas smiled for the first time in days. "That's true. Marcon, who sells water at the corner traffic light, sees everything that happens in this block, and Miss Rita, who works in the cleaning of the neighboring building, knows everyone who frequents the area. Can you talk to them discreetly?" "I can, but Mr. Gabriel, they're going to want something in return." "Obviously. What do you think would be fair?" Lucas thought for a moment. "A basic food basket for each of them, maybe about $50. Not too much, because if it's too much, they'll find it suspicious." Gabriel nodded and handed Lucas $100. "Do that, and ask them to keep an eye not only on the newspaper guy, but on any strange movements in the area." As Lucas left to carry out his mission, Gabriel turned to Ms. Marlene. "Marlene, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, Mr. Gabriel." "Do you think I'm putting you and Lucas in danger by insisting on fighting this situation? Would it be better if you both stayed away from the company until this is resolved?" Marlene looked at him with an expression that mixed determination and something akin to maternal affection. "Mr. Gabriel, I raised my son practically alone after my husband died. I faced creditors who threatened to take our home, bosses who tried to fire me for being a single mother, and bureaucracies that almost drove me insane. If I survived all that, I'm not going to abandon you now." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. "And Lucas? He's just a boy." "Lucas has faced worse things than most adults, and besides," Marlene smiled, "he reminds me so much of my John that sometimes I forget he's not my son. I'm not going to let anything happen to him." An hour later, Lucas returned with information that confirmed Gabriel's worst suspicions. "Mr. Gabriel, it's not just one guy. There are at least 3 working in shifts. Marcon said they showed up on Monday, right after some FBI agents arrived here." "And they're just observing?" "For now, yes. But Miss Rita said one of them asked the doorman of the neighboring building about the times you usually leave." Gabriel felt a chill. The situation was escalating dangerously. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Dr. Henry. "Gabriel, I need to see you urgently. I just found out that the FBI is going to request the preventive detention of Mr. Roberts, and there's a possibility they'll include you in the warrant." "What do you mean, include me?" "They found evidence that some of your signatures on contracts may have been forged, but the forensic team hasn't been able to prove it yet. Until they do, you remain legally liable." Gabriel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the situation. "How much time do we have?" "Hours, maybe a day." "Dr. Henry, what if I voluntarily present myself to show that I have nothing to hide?" "Gabriel, at this moment, voluntarily presenting yourself could be interpreted as admitting guilt. Let's wait for developments." When Gabriel hung up, he found Marlene and Lucas watching his expression with evident concern. "Things are getting complicated," he said simply. Lucas stepped closer. "Mr. Gabriel, can I suggest something?" "Go ahead." "On the street, when the situation gets too dangerous, sometimes the best strategy is to leave the known territory and go to a place where you have the advantage." Gabriel frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean that maybe it's time to leave New York for a few days. Go somewhere where you know trustworthy people, away from those guys who are watching." Marlene nodded slowly. "Lucas is right. Mr. Gabriel, do you Still have that house in the Catskills? Gabriel had completely forgotten about the vacation home he had bought years earlier as an investment and rarely used. I do, but I can't just run away. That would look like an admission of guilt. It's not running away, Lucas said firmly. It's strategy. You go there, stay in touch with the lawyer by phone, and we keep taking care of things here. If anything comes up, you come back immediately. Gabriel considered the situation. The Catskills. There was a solid logic in the boy's suggestion, and the truth was that staying in New York at this moment wasn't helping anyone. And you two, I can't leave you here alone if the situation is dangerous. Mr. Gabriel, Miss Marlene said firmly, someone needs to keep the company running. Besides, no one is going to mess with us. We are employees, not partners. Lucas nodded. And I know the streets, Mr. Gabriel. If anything gets weird, I know how to slip away. Gabriel looked at the two of them. The secretary who had become his closest confidant, and the boy who had turned into much more than an employee. The idea of leaving them in New York troubled him deeply, but he recognized the practical wisdom of the suggestion. All right, he finally said, but with conditions. First, you call me twice a day. Second, at the first sign of real trouble, you leave the office and go to a safe place. Third, if the situation doesn't improve in a week, we temporarily close the company and all leave New York. Marlene and Lucas immediately agreed. 2 hours later, Gabriel was in the car heading to the Catskills, carrying a small suitcase and a folder with the company's most important documents. As he drove along the highway, watching the urban landscape gradually give way to the mountains, he felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. For the first time in weeks, there was no one watching him, no phone ringing with bad news, no immediate pressure. But there was also the uncomfortable feeling of abandoning the two people who had become the most important in his life. When he arrived at the cabin, a rustic yet comfortable building surrounded by pine trees and overlooking the mountains, Gabriel called Ms. Marlene. "Did you arrive safely, Mr. Gabriel?" "Yes, I did. How are things there?" "Calm. The watchers are still there, but they haven't done anything, and Lucas managed to get more information from his contacts." "What kind of information?" "It seems they are just observing for now. They are waiting for developments in the police investigation." Gabriel felt a partial relief. "And Dr. Henry? Has he called with any updates?" "Not yet, but he said he would try to get more information about the investigation timeline." When he hung up, Gabriel poured himself a coffee and settled on the porch overlooking the mountains. For the first time in months, he had time to really think about his life, the choices he had made, and the future he wanted to build. The silence of the mountains was a shocking contrast to the constant hustle of New York, and Gabriel found himself reflecting on how he had become a slave to a routine that didn't make him happy. His encounter with Lucas had begun to change his perspective on what really mattered in life, and now, forced to temporarily step away from everything he had built, he started to glimpse possibilities he had never considered. When the phone rang again, interrupting his thoughts, Gabriel answered, expecting to hear Ms. Marlene's voice, but it was Dr. Henry, and his tone was urgent. "Gabriel, we have a bigger problem. The FBI has discovered where Rodrigo is." The Friday morning in the Catskills dawned shrouded in thick fog that transformed the mountainous landscape into an almost surreal scene. Gabriel had slept poorly, waking at every noise of the dawn, and now he paced restlessly on the porch of the house, the phone pressed to his ear, as Dr. Henry detailed the latest developments in the investigation. "Gabriel, the situation has completely changed in the last 12 hours. The lawyer's voice sounded tense even through the call. "The FBI located Rodrigo in a house in Osasco, held captive by a group linked to illegal gambling and money laundering." Gabriel stopped walking, feeling his stomach tighten. "Is he okay?" Physically, yes. But Gabriel, he talked. He revealed everything he knew about the company's financial operations, the contacts he made, the investments he accepted. And he confirmed that you really didn't know anything. Gabriel felt a momentary relief, quickly replaced by concern. Isn't that good? It is, and it isn't. It's good because it clears you of criminal charges. But, Gabriel, by talking, Rodrigo also named very dangerous people, people who now know that you have been cleared, but also know that your company was used for their operations. What does that mean? It means you won't go to jail, but you could have problems of another kind. These people don't like leaving loose ends, especially when there are witnesses who could complicate their lives. Gabriel let himself fall into a wooden chair, watching the fog gradually dissipate among the pines. Dr. Henry, I need to go back to New York. I can't leave Miss Marlene and Lucas alone if the situation has become more dangerous. Gabriel, please think carefully. Right now you are safe there. If you go back to New York, if I don't go back, I'm a coward who abandoned the people who trusted me. Gabriel stood up, his decision made. Doctor, meet me at the office at 2 in the afternoon and prepare all the necessary documentation to prove my innocence. Gabriel, Dr. Henry, I've already decided. I'm going to face this situation head on. When he hung up, Gabriel immediately called Ms. Marlene. Her phone rang several times before she answered, and there was something in her voice that immediately put him on alert. Mr. Gabriel, I'm glad you called. Marlene, what's happening? Your voice sounds strange. I'm a little nervous. The men who were watching the building disappeared early this morning, but... She hesitated. But what? But others have arrived, and they seem more professional. Gabriel felt a chill run down his spine. What do you mean, more professional? Better suits, better cars, a more military posture. And Mr. Gabriel, one of them, came up to the reception and specifically asked about you. What did he say? He asked when you would be back. If you usually work on weekends. Gabriel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the responsibility for putting Ms. Marlene and Lucas in a dangerous situation. And Lucas? He's here with me. But Mr. Gabriel, he's very nervous. He says he recognizes the type of people who are more dangerous than the previous ones. Ms. Marlene, listen carefully to what I'm going to say. You both leave right now. Go to a relative's house or to a hotel, anywhere that has no connection to me. Mr. Gabriel, I can't abandon the company like this. Ms. Marlene, Gabriel spoke louder than he intended. The company is not worth your lives. Get out now. There was a pause, and then Gabriel heard Lucas's voice in the background, speaking quickly with Ms. Marlene. Then she returned to the phone. Mr. Gabriel, Lucas wants to talk to you. The boy's voice sounded more mature than his 15 years when he took the phone. Mr. Gabriel, the situation here is getting complicated, but I have an idea. What kind of idea? Do you know that place where we had lunch on the first day, the restaurant on 5th Avenue? I know it. How about we meet? There at 1 o'clock? It's a public place, busy, safer than the office, and we can decide together what to do. Gabriel considered the suggestion. The restaurant, per se, really was a public and bustling environment, probably safer than the office at that moment. Lucas, do you think it's safe for you to leave the building? I think so. The guys are focused on the main entrance, and I know some exits through the back. Ms. Marlene and I managed to leave without being seen. Gabriel felt a mix of admiration and concern for the boy's tactical maturity. All right, 1 o'clock at per se. But Lucas, if you notice anything strange, anything at all, you disappear and call me later. Agreed, Mr. Gabriel. The drive back to New York was one of the most tense of Gabriel's life. During the 180 kilometers of road, he alternated between watching the rearview mirror, looking for signs that he was being followed, and mentally rehearsing different scenarios for what he might find in the city. When he arrived at the restaurant per se at 12:45, Gabriel carefully went up to the top floor, closely observing other customers and staff. The elegant and bustling environment offered a sense of normalcy that dramatically contrasted with the tension he carried. Ms. Marlene and Lucas arrived 5 minutes later, using the back entrance of the building. Ms. Marlene was dressed casually and wearing sunglasses, a discreet attempt at disguise, while Lucas wore a cap pulled down, partially covering his face. "Mr. Gabriel," Ms. Marlene said as they sat at a corner table in the restaurant, "I'm glad you're okay. I was worried about you both." Gabriel studied the tense faces of his two companions. "Tell me everything that happened since yesterday." Lucas leaned forward, speaking in a low voice. "Mr. Gabriel, those guys who showed up this morning are different. They're not common criminals nor private investigators. They seem more military." "How do you know that?" "By the way they move, how they position themselves, how they observe. My grandpa taught me to recognize soldiers. He served in the army. These guys have military training." Ms. Marlene nodded. "And there's one more thing, Mr. Gabriel. Dr. Henry called the office an hour after you left. He said he discovered something important about the people involved in the money laundering scheme." "What did he say?" "That they are not just common criminals. Apparently, there are people from the government involved and retired military working as private security for the scheme." Gabriel felt the blood run cold in his veins. Jesus Christ. Lucas discreetly observed the other restaurant patrons, a habit developed over years on the street. "Mr. Gabriel, I think we need to leave New York for a while, all of us." "I can't run away, Lucas. If I run, I'll look guilty of something." "Mr. Gabriel, with all due respect," Ms. Marlene interrupted, "at this point it doesn't matter how you will look. What matters is how you will end up, alive or dead." The brutality of Ms. Marlene's observation hit Gabriel like a bucket of cold water. He looked around the restaurant, executives having lunch peacefully, conversations about business and weekend plans, and realized how dramatically his life had changed in just a few weeks. "All right," he finally said, "let's leave the city, but not as fugitives, as people making a smart, strategic decision." Lucas smiled for the first time in days. "Where to, Mr. Gabriel?" Gabriel thought for a moment. "I have a cousin in rural Ohio. Small town, far from everything. He has a farm where we can stay until this situation clears up." "And the company?" Ms. Marlene asked. "The company will survive, or it won't. But the three of us will survive, and that is more important than any business." When they left the restaurant an hour later, Gabriel felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in his adult life, he was making a decision based solely on survival instinct, not on financial analysis or corporate strategies. As they walked through the back of the building toward the parking lot, Lucas grabbed Gabriel's arm. "Mr. Gabriel, thank you." "For what?" "For not abandoning me. When things got tough. On the street, we learned that most people disappear at the first difficulty." Gabriel stopped walking and looked at the boy. The street kid who had become an unofficial adopted son, the young man who had brought a completely new perspective to his life. "Lucas, you saved my life in many ways. I'm the one who should be thanking you." Ms. Marlene watched them with an emotional smile. "You two look like father and son." Gabriel and Lucas looked at each other and simultaneously smiled. Perhaps that was exactly. This is what they had become, without planning, without official documents, just through circumstances and choices that had united them in a non-traditional yet genuine family. "So let's go to Ohio," Gabriel said, "the three of us together." As they left the parking lot heading towards rural Ohio, Gabriel glanced in the rearview mirror one last time at New York and felt he was closing one chapter of his life to open another, completely different one. 6 months later, on a sunny January morning the following year, Gabriel woke up to the sound of birds singing in the eucalyptus trees surrounding his cousin's farm in Lakeview. The Rye, small town of 4,000 residents, known for its mystical stones and spiritual energy, had become an unexpected refuge where the three of them rebuilt their lives in a completely new way. The country house they had rented was on a hill with a panoramic view of the Mantiqueira Mountains, and the fresh morning air of rural Ohio contrasted dramatically with the pollution of New York that Gabriel had breathed for so many years. At 46, he had discovered simple pleasures he had never experienced, waking up without a rush, having breakfast while contemplating nature and working with his hands on projects that truly excited him. Miss Marlene had adapted to life in the countryside with an ease that surprised everyone. At 54, she found a surrogate family in the local community that filled the void left by the loss of her son. Now she coordinated an adult literacy project in town, using her administrative experience in a volunteer capacity, and for the first time in decades, she seemed genuinely happy. Lucas, now 16 and a few inches taller, had transformed into the young man Gabriel always suspected he could become. The boy attended the local school in the morning and dedicated his afternoons to a project that had become the passion of all three, a mechanic shop specializing in the restoration of vintage vehicles. The shop, New Beginnings Restorations, operated in a 200-square-meter warehouse that Gabriel had renovated with his own hands, discovering in physical work a satisfaction he had never experienced in the corporate world. Lucas was the technical master, applying his intuitive knowledge of mechanics to increasingly complex projects. Ms. Marlene handled the administrative side and customer relations, while Gabriel had become a sort of project manager and negotiation specialist. "Mr. Gabriel," Lucas called from the bedroom, "Today the client from Washington, D.C. has arrived to see the 1968 Beetle, and he brought that Maverick we talked about restoring." Gabriel smiled, wearing jeans and a cotton shirt, a wardrobe that had become standard after he definitively abandoned suits. "I'm coming down, Lucas." The relationship between Gabriel and Lucas had naturally evolved into something neither dared to officially name, but that worked perfectly in practice. Gabriel had become a father figure to the boy, while Lucas had brought to Gabriel's life a youthful and authentic perspective that had profoundly transformed him. When they descended to the workshop, they found a 50-year-old man admiringly observing a turquoise 1968 Beetle they had completely restored. The car shone under the morning light, each chrome piece reflecting the artisanal care that had been invested in the project. "Impressive," said the client, delicately running his hand over the bodywork. "You really made it better than new." Lucas approached with visible pride. "Mr. Robert, we replaced the entire engine, rewired the electrical system, and the paint has 7 layers of varnish. It will last another 30 years without a problem." "And the Maverick you brought?" Gabriel asked, observing the orange 1970s car parked in front of the workshop. "It's a more ambitious project," Robert explained. "It belonged to my father, and it's been sitting for 15 years. I want to turn it into a gift for my son, who is graduating in engineering." Lucas walked around the Maverick, observing with experienced eyes. "It will take work, but it's possible. V8 engine, solid body, 3 months of intense work." Ms. Marlene approached with a folder of estimates. "Mr. Robert, based on what we've done with similar cars, we estimate $15,000 for a complete restoration. This includes the engine, transmission, electrical system, paint, upholstery, everything." "Done," Robert said without hesitation. "You've gained an impressive reputation in a short time. You have clients talking about you even in New York." Gabriel and Lucas exchanged a meaningful glance. In recent months, they had received orders from various cities, and the small workshop in Lakeview was becoming known among classic car collectors throughout the region. After Robert left, leaving the Maverick for restoration, the three gathered on the porch of the house for afternoon coffee, a daily ritual they had developed to plan projects and simply enjoy each other's company. "Gabriel," Miss Marlene said, pouring coffee into ceramic mugs made by local artisans, "I received a letter from Dr. Henry this morning." Gabriel accepted the envelope with some apprehension. Correspondence from New York always brought news about the legal developments of the Robert case, which had dragged on for months. As he read the letter, his expression gradually changed from concern to surprise, and then to something resembling relief. "What does it say?" Lucas asked anxiously. "It says the case has been officially closed. All charges against me have been dropped. The company has been formally exonerated and—" Gabriel paused, rereading a part of the letter. "And Robert signed a plea agreement. He will serve 2 years in a halfway house in exchange for testifying against the real culprits behind the scheme." Ms. Marlene sighed in relief. "And those dangerous people?" According to Dr. Henry, most were arrested in a major operation by the FBI last week. The money laundering scheme has been dismantled. Lucas leaned forward, interested. "Does this mean we can go back to New York?" Gabriel looked at the boy, then at Ms. Marlene, and finally at the landscape of the mountains stretched to the horizon. "We can. But the question is, do we want to?" The silence that followed was not one of doubt, but of contemplation. In the last 6 months, the three had discovered a quality of life none of them had experienced before. The workshop was more than a business. It was a passion project that fulfilled them professionally. The local community had welcomed them as family, and they had found purpose in work that truly mattered. "Mr. Gabriel," Lucas finally said, "on the street, I learned that home is not a place. It's where you feel safe and valued. And here," he gestured to the workshop, to the mountains, to the two who had become his family, "here I feel at home." Ms. Marlene nodded with shining eyes. "I agree with Lucas. In New York, I was just an efficient secretary. Here I am, a teacher, a friend, a member of a community. It's completely different." Gabriel remained silent for a long moment, watching Lucas mentally work on the workshop projects and Ms. Marlene flipping through a magazine about adult education. Two strangers who had become the most important people in his life, in a town he had never imagined he would know, building together, something far more valuable than the business empire he had lost. "So it's decided," Gabriel finally said. "We're staying." Lucas smiled broadly, and Ms. Marlene stood up to hug the two men who had become her son and chosen brother. "But," Gabriel continued, "let's do this right. Lucas, tomorrow we will go to the courthouse to register your legal guardianship with me. Ms. Marlene, how about you become an official partner of the workshop, and all of us will make a 5-year plan to expand the business, maybe open a technical school for automotive restoration here in the area." Lucas looked at Gabriel with an expression that mixed gratitude, affection, and something close to reverence. "Mr. Gabriel, are you sure about the legal guardianship?" "Lucas, I am sure of many things I have discovered this year. I am sure that true family has nothing to do with blood. I'm sure that success is not measured in money, but in the quality of the relationships you build. And I'm absolutely sure that you are the best son I could have." The tears Lucas tried to hide did not go unnoticed by Ms. Marlene, who discreetly wiped her own eyes. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and pink, the three remained on the porch, each lost in their own thoughts, but united by the certainty that they had found something rare and precious, A second chance to build a life based on genuine love, meaningful work, and shared purpose. Gabriel looked at the orange Mustang waiting for restoration in the workshop's yard and smiled. Like that old car, his own life had needed to be completely taken apart and rebuilt to function properly again, and now, surrounded by the two people he loved most in the world, in a small town in rural Ohio, he finally understood what it meant to be truly at home.